start day 2 session. We have some advanced topics related to the processing of SAR image, and also we have to discuss terrain related parameters associated with the brightness value of the pixel. As we have discussed earlier, that on the SAR image, the brightness of the pixel depends on 8 parameters, among which we have discussed 5 parameters in day 1, and today we shall discuss remaining 3 parameters that are actually terrain parameters, and in day 1 we have discussed system parameters. So in the terrain parameters, first we have to discuss the surface geometry. The brightness of the object or brightness of the object on the pixel depends on the surface geometry. And in surface geometry, the first thing we are going to discuss is the foreshortening. If we have variable terrain and we have slopes like this facing towards the radar, the slope facing towards the radar, in that case, if the radar beam first reaches the base of the slope and then the radar beam reaches the top of the slope, in that case foreshortening happens. The opposite may also happen. For example, in this case, as you can see, the beam is first approaching the top of the slope and then it is reaching the base of the slope. This is a different case, but we are currently discussing the case in which the beam or the radar pulse will first reach the base of the slope and then it will reach the top of the slope. If this happens, in that case, the foreside of the slope, that means this one, this foreside, will be shortened on the imagery. And as you can see, if we look from the zenith downward, in case of optical remote sensing, the distance would be like this from A to B. But in case of radar image, since the image is formed in the slant range plane, therefore the distance will be shortened like this. And this is a major problem in radar imagery. And as you can see that in this image, the foresight, the terrain has been illuminated from this direction, and as you can see, the four sides of those slopes have been shortened. Okay, so this is called foreshortening, and definitely it complicates the image interpretation, and also because the slope is facing towards the radar, it will reflect higher amount of energy towards the radar, and as a result the foresight of the slope will appear very bright in comparison to the other areas. Now let us discuss the layover. In case of layover, if we have the variable terrain and the slope is facing towards the radar, if the pulse reaches the top of the slope before reaching the base, in that case what happens, the top point comes forward to the base point. And as you can see, before imaging the A point, I mean the base, it will image the B point, the top. Therefore, it appears like top is overlaying the base. This is called layover. And as you can see here, the surface is being illuminated from this direction, and these are the layovers. Several layovers can be seen. Initially, for the beginners, it may be difficult to differentiate foreshortening and layover, but if we look at the image carefully, I have shown this image. See, in this case, the terrain has been illuminated from this direction, and as you can see, this is foreshortening. I mean, the foresight is visible. It has been shortened, but it is visible. The foresight can be seen. But in case of layover, the foresight will not be visible at all. Okay, and it appears like the terrain top is overlaying the base of the slope. See, this is foreshortening and this is layover. In case of layover, the foresight will not be visible. That means layover. These are all layovers. This is layover. Okay, but this one is foreshortening. Foresight has been shortened, but it is visible. So this is the basic difference in between the foreshortening and layover. Because of the layover, few pixels will appear very bright like this. Few pixels will appear extremely bright, and this will also complicate the image interpretation. Next is the shadow. As you can see in this figure, distance on the terrain from point A to point B is not being illuminated by the incoming energy. And since this portion is not being illuminated, it will appear completely dark on the imagery, and whatever the objects are there within this area will not be visible or will not be interpretable. Therefore, radar shadows are a great problem, and this radar shadow can be seen in case of variable terrain, or even if we have high rise buildings in the urban areas, then also shadows may appear, and shadowed areas will not be interpretable or any information will not be available in the shadowed areas. So this is again another problem for the image interpretation, radar image interpretation. And on the radar image, lot of areas may appear completely black because of this shadow. Next is the surface roughness. In surface roughness, as we have discussed earlier, that whether the surface is rough or not, that ultimately depends on the wavelength. Today we shall have a greater discussion in this issue. First, let us try to understand how the surface roughness influences the reflection or backscatter. As we know that diffuse reflectors reflect energy in all possible directions. We often say this one as hemispherical reflectance. But if the surface is smooth, in that case, the energy will be directed opposite to the incoming direction, and there will be no energy there will be no energy directed towards the sensor. As a result, these areas will appear comparatively darker. And in case of specular reflection, I mean, if the surface is smooth, in case of specular reflection, we say this one as directional reflectance, because most of the energies will be directed in a single direction rather than in all possible directions as it was in the case of diffuse reflector. Now, another case is also there. For example, as you can see in the third case, the energy is coming, the surface is rather smooth, but since we have a high rise building over here, the energy is being reflected from the wall of the building and the entire energy is being directed towards the sensor. This is called corner reflection. And as you can understand that in case of corner reflection, most of the energies will be directed towards the sensor and it will appear very bright. That is why on the radar imagery, urban areas or built up areas appear very bright because of several corner reflections. Whether the surface is rough or not, that depends on the wavelength. And several definitions are there and several formulas are also there to estimate the surface roughness. However, the most widely used formula, that is Rayleigh smooth criteria and Rayleigh rough criteria, you have to understand that this is not very precise, but this is an estimation to understand whether for a specific wavelength the surface is smooth or rough. That can be estimated with this formula. The surface is smooth if the height variation, the surface will be referred as smooth if the height variation is less than this formula. What is the formula? Lambda is the wavelength, 25 sine gamma. Gamma is the incidence angle. I mean the angle at which the energy is coming. Now see, for the rough, what is the rough criteria? In case of rough criteria, height variation on the terrain is greater than this formula. Again, lambda is the wavelength divided by 4.4 sine gamma, where gamma is the incidence angle. And I have prepared one chart just for your understanding, that this is one aircraft K-band, airborne K-band sir, then aircraft S-band sir, X-band sir, and satellite borne L-band sir. These are the wavelengths. And in centimeter, how do we define the smoothness? That means in this case, if the height variation is less than 0.048 centimeter, then this surface is smooth for this specific wavelength and for this specific incidence angle. Similarly, the height variation will be called smooth if it is less than 0.17 centimeter for the wavelength of 3 centimeter and incidence angle of 45 degree. Similarly, we also have the intermediate height variation and also rough terrain. Okay, so whether the terrain is smooth or rough or intermediate, that depends on the wavelength as well as the incidence angle. And as you know that the incidence angle is continuously varying along the swath. Therefore, for different incidence angles, the same earth surface features may appear smooth or rough depending on the incidence angle, if we consider the wavelength as constant. Next is volume scattering. In case of surface roughness, volume scattering, in surface roughness category, volume scattering is another important thing, in which the energy penetrates the vegetation canopy, and if the energy penetrates the vegetation canopy, then within the forest we may have branches, several branches, leaves. Now they will scatter the energy in many various directions, and once the energy gets some way to go out, then it comes out of the forest or the vegetation canopy. So what we have said, that when the energy penetrates the vegetation canopy in the forest, then it hits different branches of the trees, and the energy is being reflected in different directions, and the energy will be released once the energy gets some way to go out. And then in which direction ultimately the maximum amount will come, that cannot be predicted. Therefore, whether for the volume scattering the object will appear brighter or darker, that is unpredictable. We cannot predict it earlier. Therefore, a different approach has been adopted to identify the forested area or vegetated area. So, in this case, we have observed that volume scattering causes depolarization. Depolarization means changing the polarization. For example, horizontally polarized energy is being thrown, and then after volume scattering, this horizontally polarized energy will be converted into vertically polarized energy. Now, if we capture imagery in cross polarization mode like HV or VH, generally forest areas appear very bright. This this depolarization does not happen for the normal scattering. So, for the volume scattering only, this depolarization happens, and because of the depolarization, if we capture imagery in cross polarization mode, then the forest will appear brighter, and if we capture imagery in like polarization means horizontal send, horizontal receive, or vertical send, vertical receive. In this case, it will appear darker. And the volume scattering, the amount of volume scattering also depends on the wavelength, because as we know that if the wavelength increases, it it will have higher penetrability. The penetrability power increases with the wavelength. Therefore, highest penetration ability we found in P band, then it is in L band, then in the C band, and then in the X band. Normally, as we have discussed earlier, that normally we do not use the P band because it provides lower spatial resolution. However, if forest is our area of interest, or if the forest is under analysis, in that case we generally do not want very high spatial resolution, rather coarser resolution serve our purposes. But if we want to identify smaller objects like objects in the urban areas, definitely longer wavelengths are not suitable. Anyway, in this slide I have shown you the L band, C band and X band, and as you can see that in the L band we shall have highest volume scattering, in the C band, then in the C band, and then in the X band. Next is dielectric properties. Dielectric properties means basically electrical properties. Electrical properties of the terrain. What does it mean by electrical properties of the terrain? Electrical properties, see in simple words, electrical properties means how smoothly the electrical energy is being allowed to pass through an object. For example, copper is good for the transmission of electricity. So, it has high dielectric properties. If we consider plastic, it is basically resistant to the electric flow. Therefore, it does not have high dielectric property. Now, while we are discussing about the earth surface features, how can we understand it has high dielectric property? First of all, as you can understand, that metallic objects are generally possess high dielectric property. If it is metal, for example, power transmission towers, power transmission lines, they have extremely high dielectric property, and all of the energy, almost all of the energies will be directed towards the sensor, and they will appear very bright. Small electric poles or small electric towers, power line transmission towers, or even power lines, we cannot identify on the optical imageries. But in the radar imagery, wires, power transmission wires can be clearly identified. Pipelines, metallic pipelines can be clearly identified because of this dielectric property. And for example, if we have a road, okay, so for example, bituminous road, and it is very smooth, therefore specular reflection should happen over there, and it should appear very dark on the radar imagery. But we have, if we have a guardrail of metal, for example, iron or steel, then this iron or steel fencing will create very high backscatter, and they will appear very bright on the imagery. And you may find two side by side lines. One is the darker line for the road, for the bitumen surface, and one is for the metallic surface or the metallic fencing. Now, other than this, this metal or unmetal concept, water also influences the dielectric property. As you know that in rainy season, or if we have wet hands, in that case we may have the chances of getting electrical shocks while we are operating the electrical switches. Why? Because of the presence of the water, because water is again another element that helps to transmit the electrical energy. Therefore, the presence of water, or in other words, the soil moisture, actually influences the brightness on the imagery. Let us see how the soil moisture influences the brightness on the imagery. As you can see, in the first case, we have the dry soil. And this is one important thing you have to keep in your mind, that dry soil allows to penetrate the microwave energy. That means some of the energies, or some amount of energies, will be transmitted through the dry soil. However, wet soil, in case of wet soil, it does not allow to pass through the soil. The energy will not be allowed to pass through the soil. Therefore, the entire energy will be reflected. And if we consider it is this one as a rough surface, then definitely the energy will be transmitted in all possible directions, or the energy will be reflected in all possible directions. Then some of these reflected energies will definitely reach to the sensor and it will be recorded. In case of flooded soil, the height variation will not be there because the water will cover the height variation and the surface will appear as a very smooth surface, and definitely there will be a specular reflection. And because of the specular reflection, there will be no amount directed towards the sensor for recording, and therefore flooded soil or even water bodies generally appear darker on the radar imagery. Now, what about the dry soil and wet soil? Which one will appear brighter and which one will appear darker? If we compare them, the wet soil will appear brighter in comparison to the dry soil. Why? Because some of the energies, in case of dry soil, some of the energies will be transmitted through the earth surface. And as we know, say, the total incidence energy I is equal to absorbed energy by the terrain plus transmitted energy through the terrain plus reflected or backscattered energy. Now see, if there is no transmission and if there is no absorption, let us assume, in that case the reflected energy will be extremely high because entire incoming energy is being reflected. And in case of dry soil, what happens? Some amount of energy is being transmitted through the earth surface. Therefore, the amount of energy that is being reflected will be reduced. And see, in case of dry soil, if the terrain type is similar, in case of dry soil, it will appear darker in comparison to the wet soil. So, in wet soil, in case of wet soil, it will appear brighter on the radar imagery. If the soil is dry, it will have moderate brightness, and in case of flooded soil, it will appear very dark. So, this is actually just opposite to the optical remote sensing. In case of optical remote sensing, dry soil appears brighter and wet soil appears darker, whereas in case of radar imagery, wet soil appears brighter and dry soil appears comparatively darker, but it is not completely dark. Completely dark we shall obtain if the soil is flooded. So, this was about dielectric properties. So, now let us see airborne versus spaceborne radars. As you know that radars can be mounted on the aeroplanes as well as on the satellites, but we have already discussed that real aperture radar cannot be mounted on the satellites, rather only synthetic aperture radars can be mounted on the satellites. However, on the aeroplanes we can mount real aperture radar as well as synthetic aperture radar, both can be mounted. But as it is also known to you that with the advancement of satellite technology, most of the remote sensing nowadays are being performed from the satellite platform rather than the aerial platform, because satellite platform has several advantages over the aerial platform, and we are not going to discuss this issue. It is known to you, I hope. Therefore, currently most of the sensors that we use are generally mounted on the satellites rather than the aeroplanes. So, aeroplane platform is almost obsolete. Now, see some nomenclature that is important for you. As I told you that real aperture radar is being mounted on the aerial platform only. And this type of radars are called SLAR. SLAR means side looking airborne radar. Actually, all radars are side looking, but this is a convention that is followed. So, don't become confused. Radars are always side looking, but if we say SLAR, that means side looking airborne radar. Okay. And if it is synthetic aperture radar, then it can be mounted on airplanes as well as on the satellites. So, if it is mounted on the satellite, then it is called satellite SAR. Satellite SAR. Okay. And if it is mounted on aerial platform, then it is called AR SAR, not SLAR. SLAR, the term SLAR has been reserved for the real aperture radar. If we use synthetic aperture radar on the aerial platform, then it has to be termed as AR SAR, AR synthetic aperture radar. Okay. So, SLAR means real aperture radar mounted on aerial platform. AR SAR means synthetic aperture radar mounted on aerial platform, and satellite SAR means synthetic aperture radar mounted on satellite platform. Now, this is the geometry for the satellite bound radar imaging, and as you know that it is very similar, actually identical, not almost identical, exactly identical to the geometry that we have discussed earlier for the aerial platform. I mean, this is the platform that is moving in this direction, this is the flight direction, okay, and this is the nadir point, and the sensor looks off the nadir, and this is the swath. This is the near range, this is the far range, this is the look angle at near range, look angle at far range, and all these geometrical definitions will be applied that we have discussed earlier. But one thing I forgot to mention last day, that it was supposed to be discussed. Let me discuss. Let me discuss it today. That is why the radar looks off the nadir, why it can't look directly towards the nadir. So, this is the formula. Now, see, in this case, last day we have range resolution for the real aperture radar as well as the synthetic aperture radar. It is same for both. Now, how the range resolution is determined? It is determined by the pulse length, half of the pulse length actually. Half of the pulse length is the duration, time duration, and if we multiply this time duration with the speed of light, then we can get the range distance. Okay, range distance or basically range resolution. Now, see, this range resolution we obtain is actually on the slant range plane. It is not on the ground range plane. Now, we have to convert it into ground range plane. Now, what was the formula? The formula was like this. So, this is C into P divided by 2. This was the formula. Sorry. This was the formula for the slant range plane, and we are dividing this with sin theta. What is the theta? Theta is the look angle. Okay. So, this is the formula to determine the ground range resolution. Now, see, theta is the look angle. Look angle means, for example, our platform is over here. This is the nadir point, and it is looking in this direction. It is looking to off the nadir. This is our nadir point. Okay. Now, this is the look angle. Look angle at the near range and look angle at the far range. Now, see, if the sensor looks towards the nadir, then the look angle will become 0 degree or 0 radian, whatever you say, it will become 0. Then sine 0 is equal to 0. So 2 multiplied by 0 is also equals to 0, and something divided by 0 is actually undefined. Mathematics cannot solve this problem, and that is the reason why the radar cannot look directly at the nadir. If it looks at the nadir, then there will be no mathematical solution to get the pixel value, and because of this problem, the radar must look off the nadir, and we get the pixels. We have discussed all of the terrain parameters, 3 terrain parameters we have discussed, and other than these terrain parameters, we shall discuss some advanced topics. Among them, let us first start the mode of acquisition. Okay, in synthetic aperture radar, or whenever you have heard about this term synthetic aperture radar, you may also have heard several terms, lot of terms like ScanSAR, INSAR. INSAR means interferometric SAR. Then steep map scanning, etc., etc. So several terms are there. Actually, they are different types of synthetic aperture radars. In day one, we have tried to explain the classification of microwave remote sensing, but we told that we are not going to classify the synthetic aperture radar. The synthetic aperture radar may also be classified from different points of view, and we shall discuss later. So today we are going to basically discuss the classification of synthetic aperture radar. The synthetic aperture radar can be classified from different points of view. This one point of view, that is the mode of acquisition, how the image is being acquired. So in this case, 3 different types of synthetic aperture radars can be found: ScanSAR, Streep Map, and Spotlight. Now you have to understand that they are not actually different sensors. A single sensor, for example, RISAT-1. Okay, so the RISAT-1 sensor can be operated in 3 different modes. It can be operated in ScanSAR mode. It can also be operated in Streep mode, Streep Map mode, and it can also be operated in Spotlight mode. However, the image we obtain are different, and their processing techniques are also different. So first, let us try to understand the concept of this image acquisition modes. First is the ScanSAR mode. In ScanSAR mode, the sensor is tilted continuously, and different locations within the swath are focused, and by tilting the sensor, we can obtain a very wider swath, extremely wider swath. But since we are capturing the image by tilting the camera continuously, therefore the sensor won't be able to focus on a specific geographic area for a longer duration of time, and as a result, the spatial resolution or the level of detail will be coarser. However, it also has a lot of applications. For example, ocean monitoring, or flood mapping or monitoring, or for forest or agricultural areas. I mean, where we have the very large areas under investigation, and we are not going to concentrate on very small objects. And as you can see in this slide, that TerraSAR X, it has actually 270 kilometer swath, but if we use it in ScanSAR mode, then it becomes, see, 1500 kilometer swath. That is too wide, but the spatial resolution will be sacrificed. So depending on the application, we can go for the ScanSAR mode, or even we may go for the steep map mode. Steep map mode is similar to the push broom scanning, like it is like push broom scanning, and one strip of imagery can be obtained, and in this case the antenna is not being tilted, rather it remains perpendicular to the flight direction always, and a strip like imagery we can obtain with moderate resolution and with moderate swath. This mode, this type of scanning mode can be used for land cover mapping or land cover identification, etc. Now, another mode is also there, that is called spotlight mode. In spotlight mode, the sensor focuses on a small area for a longer duration of time, and thus it can generate a very long synthetic aperture radar. Now, how can the sensor can focus on a specific area for a longer duration of time? The sensor is moving continuously, it is on a moving platform. That means we have to tilt the camera again. We have to tilt the antenna again. And in this case, we can get very high spatial resolution, even few centimeters. And this type of scanning may be very useful for urban application or urban mapping, for disaster management, for earthquake disaster management, and also for individual object identification. If we want to identify very small objects, then the spotlight mode would be very useful. Next, let me show a video in which you will have some idea on these different scanning modes, how the images are being captured, and how the camera or how the sensor is being operated in different acquisition modes. First is the strip map mode. In strip map mode, as I told you, we get moderate spatial resolution and a strip like imagery, and the sensor remains perpendicular to the flight line always. Sensor is not tilted in this case. Radar pulses are thrown and backscattered energies are received, and we can obtain a strip like imagery. It is similar to the push broom scanning. So a very long strip line, strip like imagery we can obtain. Then is the ScanSAR mode. In ScanSAR mode, the sensor will be tilted, and along the swath in different areas it will be focused, and ultimately we will have a very wider swath. However, the spatial resolution will be sacrificed. So the images form like this. Next is spotlight mode. The sensor focuses on a specific geographic area for a very longer duration, and in this case also the sensor is necessary to be tilted. As you can see in this video. Okay, so let me play this video again and watch the differences. This is strip map. Then scan-SAR for wider swath. Finally, spotlight. So, based on the application, we have to choose the appropriate scanning mode. And as I told you that a single satellite or a single satellite sensor may even be used in these three different modes. As I have given one example of RISAT-1 that can give you images in all these three different modes: strip map, scan-SAR, and spotlight. Okay. So next, another classification of SAR is SLC and INSAR. SLC is single looks complex data, and INSAR means interferometric SAR. Now, for two-dimensional applications, we use SLC data, single look complex data. Why it is called complex? I will explain. Because each and every DN value in the single look complex data will have two different values. These two different complex values are represented by I and Q. We shall discuss this one later. Another is the interferometric SAR. In case of interferometric SAR, two or more images are collected for the same geographic area, but from two different locations and in similar geometry. Similar geometry means both of the sensors are looking in same direction. For example, towards the right or towards the left. It is not like that one sensor is looking from the left and the other sensor is looking from the right. In that case, the geometry will be different. So, from the same geometry, two different images are necessary to be captured for the same geographic area, but from two different locations. This is called interferometric SAR, and interferometric SAR is primarily used for obtaining digital terrain model, three-dimensional terrain model. In addition to the digital terrain model, we can also identify very small objects, even few centimeters, very small objects in case of interferometric SAR. But in case of interferometric SAR, we need multiple images. And these multiple images may be two single look complex data. I mean, two or more SLC data can generate interferometric SAR data. However, if we want to get the interferometric SAR data, the sensor is necessary to be configured. For that purpose, I shall discuss. It is similar to the optical remote sensing concept. I mean, for the two-dimensional images, two-dimensional applications, we need one image for the geographic area or the area of interest. And in case of photogrammetric application, if we want to get the height information and every detail about on the earth surface, then definitely we should obtain two images from two different locations. So let us try to understand these two data one by one. First, the SLC data, single look complex data. In single look complex data, as I told you, for each and every pixel, there will be two components, I component and Q component. I is the real component, or it is also called in phase component, and Q is the imaginary component. This is called quadrature component. What does it mean by in phase component and quadrature component? We shall discuss in the next slide. However, the intensity image or the amplitude image can be generated from the complex SAR data. Here, this is the formula, as you can see, amplitude or intensity. This is commonly referred by the DN value of the pixel. So, the DN value of the pixel is generated with this formula, square root of I square plus Q square. I mean, the squared value of the real component plus squared value of the imaginary component. Now, let us try to understand. This is a very simple formula to determine the DN value on the radar imagery. But what does it mean by real component, in phase component, and what does it mean by imaginary component or quadrature component? See, we have to understand the phase of a wave. What does it mean by phase? If we consider one complete cycle means one complete wavelength as a circle, then it can be explained like this. For example, in this case, the wave is being started from 0, then it is going up and it reaches its positive maxima. So, this angle is actually 90 degree. Then it goes down and again it reaches 0. Then the angle becomes 180 degree. And then again it goes to negative maxima, then it is 270 degree, and again it comes back to 0 again, and then it is actually 360 degree. If we can compare a complete wave like this. So, this is 0, this is 90, 180, 270 and 360. Now, phase means where from the electromagnetic wave has been started. For example, if we look these two waves, for this wave the phase is 0, that means it has started from 0 degree. However, for the dotted line, what is the phase? The phase is 90. It has been started from 90 degree. So, different phases may be there in the energy, and definitely in case of SAR, this phase information is very important because we are actually dealing with the distance, and distance means say number of cycles per second Number of cycle means number of wave cycles per second multiplied by the speed of light, and then we can get the distance and see one wavelength. For example, in case of radar, if the wavelength is 1 meter, in that case measuring the entire wavelength or counting the number of wavelengths that has been elapsed to start from the sensor to the target, and then again after reflection coming back to the sensor is not enough. We also have to measure the phase, means 1/4 of the cycle, complete cycle, for better accuracy, and also to identify different backscatters came from the terrain, because in different backscatters the phases will be different, and based on the phases they could be identified that from which location it came. And what about the quadrature information? Quadrature, as you know, that quad means basically 1/4. So quadrature means basically 1/4 of the cycle. So we, in case of quadrature information, we also get the information about the 1/4 of the cycle. I mean variations within this quadrature or variation within 1/4 of the cycle. And if we can measure the phase and the quadrature information, then we can precisely determine the location and as well as the brightness of the pixel. So these two are very important thing, and in each and every radar image, single look complex data, we shall have two information associated with each pixel. Do not confuse it with the optical image. In case of optical image, each pixel is associated only one value, that is normally normally termed as DN value or brightness value. But in case of radar, for each and every pixel, for single look complex data, we shall have two values. One is the I value, that is the in phase value, and the Q value, that is the quadrature value, and we have to process the SAR data to generate the brightness image from this phase value and quadrature value. Now we can also generate power image with this simple formula. Power image is equal to amplitude image square. So this is another formula that we use. However, power images are generally not used in most of the cases. Rather, we use the amplitude image. But in some of the instances, if we want to increase the discrimination among the pixels, if we want to increase the discrimination among the pixels, in that case, power image may be desired rather than the amplitude image. Otherwise, amplitude image can be used for any kind of analysis. And in case of amplitude image, you have to understand that in case of amplitude image or intensity image, this is also called intensity image. Intensity image, for each and every pixel, we shall have only one value, that is the brightness value or the DN value, that is necessary. This DN value or this brightness value is necessary to be generated from the I and Q component. And the formula is very simple. Amplitude image is equal to square root of I square plus Q square. Okay, so this was the case of SLC data. We have not discussed yet the INSAR data, interferometric SAR data. Now see, in SLC data, if we create a cross section, for example, as I have shown with this line, in this cross section, we have homogeneous area in this circle, homogeneous land cover in this area. However, we have heterogeneous land cover within this area. But for the homogeneous area, the pixel values are continuously changing. And also, as you can see here, we have brighter areas, here we have darker areas, but all of them are actually belonging to water. And it is general expectation that for all of the water pixels, will have similar kind of values. At least we should not have very bright or very darker pixels, or see, we should be able to differentiate the water body from the other earth surface features. So radiometric calibration is very important for each and every SLC data. This, what does it mean by radiometric calibration? This radiometric calibration, let us try to understand what does it mean by radiometric calibration. Radiometric calibration is performed to generate backscatter coefficient image. Three different backscatter coefficients are generally used to process the radar image. Among them, the sigma naught is the most widely used. Sigma naught, what does it mean by sigma naught backscatter coefficient? Sigma naught is the backscatter returned to the antenna from a unit area on ground. For example, 1 square meter ground area. So sigma naught is the backscatter returned to the antenna from a unit area on the ground. It is corrected for the local incidence angle. Local incidence angle means, for example, we have terrain like this. That means when the energy is coming, it is hitting the target in different angles. These are the angles, local angles. So the sigma naught is also local incidence corrected angle or local incidence angle corrected data. So sigma naught is corrected for the local incidence angle and is thus in the realm of ground range. So that is again another important thing, that we are getting the data in ground range. Sigma naught is the usual measure used to evaluate the reflectivity conditions of the surface independent from the geometric effects. So that is why it is more popular. Sigma naught is often used as in scientific interpretation of SAR imagery, as the pixel values are absolutely calibrated. Different SAR images in sigma naught notation can be easily be compared. Additionally, experienced interpreters are able to retrieve information about surface scattering mechanisms or surface properties in a sigma naught image. The topographic impact on the backscatter is minimized. Therefore, we get a better imagery. The backscatter depends on the surface backscatter properties and the image looks flat in case of sigma naught imagery. It varies with the radar wavelength and definitely on the polarization. Next is the beta naught. Beta naught is a measure of the backscatter that is returned to the antenna from a distributed scatterer on the ground. Beta naught is in slant range geometry. It is not in ground range geometry like sigma naught. As slant range pixels cover different areas which vary with the local incidence angle, it is dependent on the look angle plus DEM. Beta naught contains a geometric impact on the radar backscatter. For example, bright pixels in the foreshortened areas or the slopes that are facing towards the radar. So, as you can understand that sigma naught data is much better than the beta naught. A beta naught image is useful to compare images of different search sensors or different times and provides rough information about surface scattering mechanisms and surface properties. Other than these two, sigma naught and beta naught, we also have gamma naught, that is the backscattering coefficient normalized by the cosine of the incidence angle. But the gamma naught is rarely used. In very few software you will get this gamma naught information. Rather, in most of the software you will get the backscatter coefficient as sigma naught or beta naught. Now let us try to understand how these values are generated in digital image processing or in SAR image processing. See, in case of beta naught, how the beta naught is calculated? The beta naught is calculated with the product of Ks and Dn square. Dn, how can we get the Dn? We have already discussed that Dn can be calculated with this formula, square root of I square plus Q square. Okay, and Ks is the calibration constant and it differs from sensor to sensor. So, beta naught in dB or decibel, in decibel can be measured with this formula 10 log 10 of beta naught. Okay, so this is unitless value. Now we can determine the sigma naught. The sigma naught can be determined with this formula beta naught into sine theta. Whereas in case of gamma naught, we have what we told, that this value will be multiplied the cosine of theta, cosine of the local incidence angle. But here we are multiplying this one with the sine theta, where theta is the local incidence angle or local look angle, and therefore this is actually this we will not have the terrain influence or look angle influence. So while we are going for radiometric correction with the sigma naught, the local look angle influence will be minimized. Anyway, so the sigma naught value with the dB unit or in decibel can be determined with the beta naught in dB plus log plus 10 log 10 sine theta. Okay, so this is this formula may appear a little bit complicated. However, this is the background knowledge, and we generally perform all these things in digital image processing software, and the software will handle all these things. However, we need to know that what does it mean by beta naught, or what does it mean by sigma naught, which one is better, which one handles the look angle, which one cannot handle look angle, etc. And based on that, we can perform our radiometric correction. Next, see, the search systems may be classified into three different categories. The SLC search system, SLC means single look complex system, monostatic SAR, bistatic SAR, and multistatic SAR. In case of monostatic SAR, it uses a single antenna for throwing the energy and also for receiving the energy. I mean, a single antenna will be used as directional antenna as well as receive antenna. The energy will be thrown by the antenna, and the same antenna will be used to receive the energy, and this will be coordinated by a duplexer. And all of the modern spaceborne synthetic aperture radars are actually monostatic. They are not bistatic or multistatic. However, bistatic synthetic aperture radars are also there. What does it mean by bistatic? Bistatic means one antenna will transmit energy and a different antenna will receive the energy. As one example can be given, Tandem X and TerraSAR X are twin satellites. So in bistatic mode it can be operated. I mean they are both monostatic, sir, but they have the instrumentation so that TerraSAR X can throw the energy and Tandem X can receive the energy. So this is the concept of bistatic, sir. Other than this, we may also have theoretically the multistatics, sir. In multistatics, sir, we shall have more than one transmitter and more than one receiver. So multiple transmitters will be there and also multiple receivers will be there. However, till date we do not have any sensor of this kind. This is under experiment, and in future we may get multistatic SAT data, but till date whatever the data we get, most of them are actually monostatic. Next is interferometric SAT. INSAR. In short, we say this INSAR. In case of interferometric SAR, as I told you that more than one sensor should collect the image for the same earth surface area from two different locations. We may introduce two different platforms to capture for simultaneous capture of two images, for example Tandem X and TerraSAR X, or even a single sensor can be used to capture multiple images in two different passes with slight differences in their geometry. In their geometry means in their look angle, basically from two different locations they should capture the imagery. What is the benefit? The benefit, as I told you, we can generate digital elevation model, okay, and also we can determine very small variations on the earth surface. So the resolution will also be increased at a high rate if we consider the interferometric SAR. Although our discussion, I mean this course is concentrated on the SLC data, single look complex data. However, we are discussing the interferometric SAR for our theoretical background. So let us see what happens in interferometric SAR. In interferometric SAR, one satellite from two different locations or two satellites can be used to capture the imagery. And as you can say, you can see we are using in this picture, I have shown the same satellite, but from two different orbits, from orbit 1 and from orbit 2. They are looking at the earth surface and they are capturing imagery of the same geographic area. Now see, the distance between these two locations, observation locations, is called baseline, indicated with letter B. And if we draw one perpendicular line from this point, so this is 90°. So this is basically R range, this is also R, and this one is the difference of R. Okay, this delta R may be positive or may be negative. As you can see in this case, this delta R is positive. and we have two different ranges, and definitely for these two different ranges there will be phase differences, and by measuring the phase difference, the terrain variation can be understood, or the third dimension can be determined, and in addition to x and y we can also obtain the third dimension or the z dimension, and we can generate digital elevation model. So, this is the basic concept of interferometric SAR. We may use one satellite from different locations, or even we may use multiple satellites. As you know, in case of Sentinel also they have twin radar satellites to act as interferometric SAR. And interferometric SAR is perhaps the future of synthetic aperture radar, because in interferometric SAR, in addition to the X and Y, we are also getting the Z information, and also it can concentrate on very smaller details. Now, let us see the monostatic SAR. In monostatic SAR, or it is basically monostatic interferometric SAR. Okay, so this is a combination. Okay, monostatic but interferometric. So in monostatic interferometric SAR, two locations are necessary to capture the same geographic area. So we can use a single satellite from two different orbits or from two different locations. Now, bistatic interferometric SAR, in which we can use multiple satellites. Okay, and this one will throw the energy, this one will also throw the energy, and the reflected energy may be recorded by this sensor, and the energy thrown by this sensor will be recorded by this sensor. So, this is the combination that we can get bistatic INSAR, and definitely perhaps in future we are going to get the bistatic INSAR data. Many of the space agencies are now launching twin radar satellites, so that they can be used in SLC mode, single loop complex mode, they can be used in monostatic mode, they can be used in bistatic mode, and also they can be used in INSAR mode, and a combination of bistatic and INSAR. So, if we can launch twin satellites, twin SAR satellites, then we shall have many combinations of data. So, next is the SAR data. What kind of data we get from the SAR? First of all, the raw data. Generally, end users like us do not procure raw data. Raw data are generally procured by a very narrow group of scientists who are actually interested to develop some algorithm to convert the raw data into the interpretable data. Otherwise, normally the end users or the people who are using the radar data in the application, in different application areas, do not procure raw data. Then we may have the single loop complex data or multi-loop data. As we have discussed the multi-loop processing in the last day. So, you know what does it mean by multi-loop? A single beam is splitted into multiple beams, and instead of one pixel we generate multiple pixels, and then these pixels are averaged to generate a single pixel, and it definitely reduces the speckle effect, and also this is a new thing I am telling you today. That is multi-loop processing. In fact, converts the slant range image into ground range image. So this is again another advantage of the multi-loop processing. So we may have the single loop data. If we have the single loop data, then it is fine. It can also be processed for the multi-loop processing to obtain the multi-loop data, or even we can obtain the multi-loop data directly. Then geocoded terrain corrected data, geocoded terrain corrected data in single loop or in multi-loop. Geocoded terrain corrected means you may think of this data as the orthorectified data. I mean, in case of terrain variation, because of the terrain variation, we have lot of distortions on the imagery. So if we correct the terrain related issues from the imagery, then it is called orthorectified image in case of optical images, and in case of SAR images, it is called terrain corrected data. I mean, there will be no terrain influence on that, and you can get the accurate measurements from the imagery. So terrain corrected data is another important thing. We have to process the data for terrain correction. Then polarimetric data we may get in SLC mode or also in multi-loop mode. I mean, in single loop or multi-loop, we may have single polarization, we may have dual polarization, even we may have quad polarization. Okay, single polarization means, for example, horizontal send, horizontal receive. So this is single polarization, or horizontal send, vertical receive. So single polarization. Dual polarization means basically there will be two images. Okay, two single polarization images actually. And in case of quad pole, we shall have four different polarized images: HH, VV, HV, and VH. Okay, so this is basically polarized. Then we have the hybrid data. Hybrid data is actually circular transmit, right? Circular transmit and linear receive. So this is one important thing I have to discuss today. Earlier, regarding the polarization, I told you that polarization means basically the orientation of the electric field. If the electric field of the electromagnetic energy is in horizontal direction, then it is called horizontally polarized energy. And if it is in vertical direction, I mean, it is means the electric field is in vertical direction, then it is called vertically polarized energy. And I also told you that to increase the power, we need to throw the energy in a specific polarization, because our source of energy is not powerful like sun. So from a very long distance, we have to throw the energy. The energy is necessary to travel through a very long atmospheric layers, and then it will hit the target, and then backscattered energy will also travel through a very long distance. Therefore, the energy, the amount of energy should be significant enough so that it can reach to the terrain, and again from the terrain it can reach to the sensor. So, if we want to increase the power of the energy, then we have to send the energy in a specific polarization. Either we send the energy in horizontal polarization, or we send the energy in vertical polarization. However, there is another polarization that is called circular transmit, circular polarization. Till date, we have only one satellite, RISAT 1, that uses this circular transmit. However, while receiving, it receives linear polarization. So, how it happens? Let us try to understand. So, the energy, for example, in case of circular polarization, RISAT 1 actually uses right circular polarization. So, the the energy is being thrown like this. Okay, and see, there will be different polarizations. Okay, so in circular motion, the polarization is going to happen. So it will be like this, right circular polarization. It will not have a single specific linear polarization. So the polarization will be changing continuously in right hand side circular direction. Okay, so electrical field is changing its angle, and in right hand side circular direction this change will happen. But after hitting the target, uh, uh, after the modification of the energy will be received in linear direction. That is why in case of RISAT 1, you may find images like this RH, RV. So that means right circular transmit, horizontal receive, right circular transmit, vertical receive. These two polarizations have been used in RISAT 1. Why? Because they thought that if we throw the energy in a specific direction, a specific polarization, in that case, the energy will hit the target in a specific polarization and a specific reaction will happen on the earth surface. Rather, if we can send the energy in different polarization or a polarization that is changing continuously its angle, then different objects will be targeted in different angles of the electrical field, and then the interaction will be rather better and we would be able to identify more earth surface features rather than if we send it in a linear polarization. So that was the logic behind the right circular polarization. However, in future whether we will get this right circular polarization or not, that will depend on the success of this mission, and till date other than the RISAT 1, we do not have any satellite that throws the energy in circular polarization. However, if the sensor throws the energy in circular polarization, then it is called hybrid polarization. Okay, so see, in hybrid polarization, how many combinations we may have? We may have only two combinations: right circular send, horizontal receive, right circular send, vertical receive. So we will not have four different quad pole data. Okay, we may have dual pole data, single polarization or dual polarization we can get, but we cannot get quad polarization. Quad polarization is only possible, or four different polarized images is only possible in case of linear polarization. Now see, let us look at this picture. This is the raw image. Okay, raw radar image, and as you can see, as if there is nothing, you cannot identify even a single object, because different backscatters coming from different sources, and from the same backscatter also different energies are coming in different phases, because we are using the synthetic aperture radar. The antenna is continuously throwing the pulses from different locations, and then the backscatter energy is being recorded. For a single object we have multiple backscatters, and these multiple backscatters are recorded, so they will overlay. I mean, one information will overlay another information, and ultimately the image will appear like this. I am showing you a zoomed portion. See, this is the image. and you cannot identify a single object, single Earth surface object. Therefore, these raw images are necessary to be processed to get the information. This is the SLC data, single look data after processing. I mean, once we process the raw image, then we can obtain this kind of image. Again, this is very noisy, and information extraction is extremely difficult. Now see, it has been processed. So this is a zoomed portion. I mean, if we zoom a specific portion, I have tried to zoom this portion. Okay, and in this area, as you can see, again this is not interpretable, and objects, smaller details cannot be identified in this image. Now this image is necessary to be processed for multi-look processing, and now once go for the multi-look processing, it will be converted into ground range image, and as well as we shall have very high spatial detail in comparison to the previous one. And can you see, this is the portion, and now this time we can identify a lot of things in comparison to the previous image. So this images I am showing you are actually from the same geographic area, and now if you compare the raw data with this multi-look processing data, and you can understand the difference. So these are the processing techniques that we have to perform and that we have to learn, so that we can extract the information from the synthetic aperture radar images. Now this is a comparison in which I have compared the LiDAR, that is a very promising field of remote sensing. We also have optical multispectral remote sensing, another promising field of remote sensing, and the SAR. And let us try to understand that if we consider the platform, then LiDAR can be performed from the aerial platform. Okay, it cannot be mounted on satellites. Optical multispectral remote sensing can be performed from the aerial platform as well as the space platform. Synthetic aperture radar is also possible to be performed from the aerial platform and as well as the space platform. Now, in case of radiation, LiDAR has its own radiation. This is active remote sensing, but optical multispectral remote sensing is dependent on the sunlight. It does not have its own radiation. However, the SAR has its own radiation. Now, what kind of wavelength we use? In case of radar, we use infrared light. In case of multispectral remote sensing, we use visible and infrared light. And in case of SAR, we use microwave light that has longer wavelength. Therefore, it can penetrate atmospheric cloud, atmospheric haze, or atmospheric water vapor. Now, for the light, we have single frequency, only one frequency is used. In case of multispectral optical remote sensing, we can use multiple frequencies to get multiple images, and in case of SAR also we can get multiple images by using multiple frequencies like C band, X band, L band, and so on. For the lighter, polarimetric data is not possible. Now, in optical remote sensing also getting polarimetric image is not possible, but in SAR we can get polarized images. We can get images in different polarization. Interferometric data is not possible in LiDAR, also not possible in optical remote sensing, but in SAR it is possible. LiDAR can be operated during the daytime or night time. However, optical remote sensing can only be performed within the daytime, Okay, but SAR can be operated in the daytime as well as in the night time. LiDAR is affected by the or blocked by the atmospheric cloud. Multispectral remote sensing is also not, optical multispectral remote sensing is also not possible with the presence of cloud, but SAR remote sensing is possible with the presence of cloud. So, the SAR has several advantages over the LiDAR and over the multispectral optical remote sensing. Therefore, the SAR is becoming more popular in some of the areas, especially the areas in which getting clear sky is extremely difficult. For example, tropical areas or the areas where we have the rainy season. I mean, the presence of cloud is a common phenomena in some specific seasons. But in case of SAR, we do not have all these problems. Therefore, it has many advantages, but only limitation is its complexity. The data we obtain by using the SAR is very complex in nature, and extracting the information from the SAR data is also very difficult, and getting the actual information is much more complex in comparison to the LiDAR or the optical multispectral remote sensing. Next, the application areas of synthetic aperture radar. Okay, where we can use synthetic aperture radar, as you can see in this figure, in forest, ocean, cryosphere, urban and agriculture. So, in these areas we have the SAR application. However, the entire agricultural application cannot be covered by SAR, as if you have to understand that only a small portion of the agricultural research or agricultural activities will be controlled by the SAR or will be benefited by the SAR. So, do not try to overestimate the things. I mean, while we discuss about the remote sensing, some of us even think that if we can get one remote sensing image, perhaps we can do everything, or solution of everything is possible with the remote sensing data, but it is not like that. I have discussed so many advantages of SAR. That does not mean that SAR can do everything. So, every technology has its own limitations, and also you have to understand the limitations. And but the most important thing you have to understand is remote sensing cannot provide you all required information. So, it is not like that if you get a SAR image, you can do anything and everything. Okay.